if I was China, this right now is when I would try to become the world superpower, because we have a president that's like 110 years old who I believe can't handle a global World War III. I don't think that is in the cards for Joe Biden, regardless of how you feel. Welcome to the Chasing Mountains podcast. We've got a lot to talk about. It's been a while.
It has been, but hide your kids, hide your wives. What are we talking about today?
There's some stuff going on in the skies over North America.
Dude, not just stuff. I mean, we got spy balloons. They're calling it UFOs, which is confusing to me. So can you just like update everybody what's going on? Yeah. And by the way, welcome to season 2, episode 1. We're in a new location. We're not quite finished just yet. Man, we're having so much fun. We just got done with kind of a winter break. Yeah,
like I guess a super quick update on the show. We are in your basement at your business now. Mm-hmm. We had been doing the show from my basement at my house. My wife and I sold our house. We're in the process.
Congratulations.
Still of moving. Thank you.
Dude, I was so worried it wasn't going to sell because of the market.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. Yeah. We could chat about that sometime, but it was recommended to not have like fancy podcast stuff at your house and having like families tour the house. Probably good advice. We didn't want anybody tripping over anything or
stealing stuff,
walking away with it. So we had to pack it up, take a brief hiatus, and like now the whole world is literally
in the time that we took a break, so much stuff happened, and we've been talking to each other, sending each other articles about just different things, and it's like, well, we got to. So we're back at it. So this weekend, what's going on, man? This is weird.
Yeah, so serious stuff, and everybody's talking about it. We're far from the only ones talking about this, and we're doing this show. This situation changes literally daily, almost hourly at this point, but it's Sunday night on the 12th of February. I just checked, almost jokingly, for an update to make sure that when we talk about kind of the situation of North American defense, I want to make sure that I was up to date. And as of just a few hours ago, it sounds like we've fighter jets have shot down another UFO. Is
this the different one from Friday as well?
Yeah. So quick recap for those that are either watching this in the future or maybe just aren't up to speed. We've been dealing with unidentified objects in North American airspace. Some of them we've determined initially there was a big balloon with electronic devices attached to the bottom of it over Montana.
It looked like a satellite strapped to the bottom of a big balloon.
Yeah.
It's like they couldn't quite make it to space, so they slapped it on a balloon and said, bye.
Yeah. So that was spotted over Montana. We shot it down off the coast of the Carolinas and the Atlantic. Then we shot down something off the coast of Alaska. Then NORAD shot down some object in the Yukon in Canada. And then just as of, again, a few hours ago, apparently F-22s again shot down some object.
Are they calling it a UFO?
No, so this one, it sounds like initial reports are that it's very much the same as what was in Montana. So spy balloon. It's starting to appear that this was maybe like a mass widespread effort across North America and other areas to collect intel.
Can we backtrack just a little
Like
bit?
clearly, like I should say that's obvious,
right?
But we're finding so many of these objects. I think initially it was like, oh my gosh, there's a spy balloon that's traversing over sensitive targets in the U.S. and now suddenly it's like daily. There's more and more.
Don't you feel like it's comically like old school technology though? Why, when they have satellites in outer space, supposedly, unless they don't, but like they can just spy with their satellites. So like, why this? Is it more of just seeing what we'll do?
Well, I would have said maybe poking the bear a little bit, but what I would have said is, who cares if it's old technology if it works? And apparently it has. Apparently there's these spy balloons have come close before, not just traverse the heartland, but
I know they said something happened before where in the Trump administration it happened as well, but they just chose not to tell him. No, that's what they said.
Yeah, there was some mixed reporting on that. I think what was actually decided was that it was discovered after the fact, for one thing. It wasn't like, hey, there's still something up there. We need to make a decision what to do. I think they realized it had happened and was no longer a threat. I think also it wasn't quite as invasive of an incursion. Like it was more off the coast somewhere. But
it's kind of actually brilliant. If you're looking for something big and bad and all of a sudden something as simple as a balloon comes through.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe the technology wasn't designed to really see it. I mean, did we spot it, or was it because someone exposed it?
Well, I think that apparently it was like a gap in our air defense system, which is not great. But at like that 60,000 foot range, apparently they weren't observing that much. So
they just kind of knew and went in.
Well, yeah. So, but what's weird is that from what I could see, this most recent shoot down over the Great Lakes was like at 20,000 feet. So, which is lower than any of the rest of them.
Tensions are high already with China. Why would they choose to do something like this? And why wouldn't they think we'd be able to capture one of these things and get a ton of information from them anyways? Or is it just poking the bear? I just feel like it's a dumb move to do right now. You know, I just feel like it seems weird when the government's announcing all this stuff. Like a lot of people are like, it's a UFO. Don't get me wrong. I wanted it to be a UFO because I love me a good space story. But like the truth is, when the government comes out and says, we have an unidentified object flying through blah, 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 this space, and everybody's like, it's a UFO. I'm like, I don't believe it. If the government's coming out and if CNN's saying it, I don't know how much I really care to believe it. UFO
literally means unidentified flying object. And that is what we're dealing with.
But it's morphed into something else.
It's morphed into aliens. But I don't for a second think that that's what we're dealing with. I think it's pretty clear we're dealing with foreign actors. But in doing some research about this, I noticed some really, really interesting to what has happened before in history, American history. So let me frame up a situation for you. I'm going to read you what was going on back in 1947, and you tell me if this sounds like today. Okay. Cold War had just started, 1947. There were fears over an aggressive, nuclear-armed, westward pushing Russia, at the time Soviet Union. I think we're there.
You think?
Pushing into Ukraine.
Yeah.
Concerns about communism and socialism throughout the West. So in the ranks of Hollywood, Wall Street, professional sports.
Check. That sounds familiar.
High altitude spy balloons.
Are you serious?
And UFO sightings and stories. China is not the first to use high altitude spy balloons and call it weather balloons. We did that back in 1947.
The U.S. did?
Project Mogul. So let me talk to you about Project Mogul really quick. There's a lot of people in the traditional UFO circles, aliens among us circles who say this isn't the case. I don't believe that. I think.
What isn't the case?
What I'm about to say.
Okay.
So Roswell, New Mexico, we know that supposedly that's, the story is that a rancher had a saucer, a disc crash land on his property. He called the sheriff, who then called the Air Force base located near there in Roswell. And they came out, and it was released by the Army that they had found a flying disc. They had found a disc, and it had crash landed, and it was released by the paper as a flying saucer. And so that kind of from
the military released that?
Yeah. So the sequence of events there is really interesting. What was happening is that there were very real concerns that the Soviet Union had nuclear warheads.
They do now.
Apparently at the time, we were using high altitude spy balloons equipped with like listening devices. I don't know if they were just microphones or recorders, but apparently they were listening somehow. I don't know how it all works, but listening for nuclear explosions. Like they were listening for tests. Because they didn't have the ability to, we think of now, like we have GPS satellites, like you would see that. They didn't have that. Nobody had that. So
basically they were looking for a spike in the audio.
Yeah.
That sounds like a boom.
So they were sending up these super high altitude spy balloons that were spying on Russia. And I guess what happened is one of them came down. It was a bunch of foil and metallic equipment and, looked really unusual. Didn't have military markings. And this rancher has no idea what has crash landed. The press communications person at that base in Roswell thought that it would be a good idea, I guess, to like throw people off the scent because Project Mogul, nobody was supposed to know about this. Nobody was supposed to know about this, especially our enemies.
And so he's just like, it's an alien.
It was official Army report that they had found a disc that had crash landed. The next day, like after that came out in the paper the day following, the very next day, the Army retracted it and released a statement that it was in fact a weather balloon. It was a high altitude weather balloon, which you may recall is what China said initially about this
civilian weather balloon.
Yeah.
It got off track.
Yep. And it wasn't. It was, at the time, it was part of this whole espionage program that we were running using spy balloons. So this is not, you mentioned it being like an old technology. It is, and it's tried and true, and it's worked before. What's interesting to me is that in modern times, I'll say, like, I think that, we were one of the first to use balloons for like digital spying, electronic spying. They've used it elsewhere in the past to like see foreign troop movements, like you send people up in blimps. It's interesting that we had that gap sort of in our defense system, thinking that nobody else would use that here over North America.
I'm reminded of in history, there was actually a really terrifying balloon attack. And it ended up, I think, killing the guy who invented it. But basically what he did was they had a high altitude balloon, but they put bats with little bombs on it that they basically started fire. And once they released the bats, it activated the timer. So what they do is they'd wait for the balloon to get over the enemy. They released it with the timer. The bats would fly into, crevices in a house, underneath the overhang in a building or whatever it is. And then the timing would go off. It would catch them on fire because they're always looking for darkness.
That's terrible.
Yes, except for they accidentally got out apparently and burnt a lot of people in the process while they were trying to make it. So it's funny how you say it, but like throughout history, they've been using balloons to try to either spy or attack people. And it's just weird that you're right. It's tried and true. And it's kind of weird, man.
Well, I want to come back to bats in a second because that's really interesting with some more recent military technology that is a little concerning for me with everything that we're seeing up in the skies right now. But just coming back to kind of Roswell being the launch point for UFOs, because that was the time of the Cold War. There were a lot of airborne research projects that the U.S. was doing mainly to conduct spying operations, high altitude spy operations over Russia. But one of the things that I found that was interesting was there were several other projects that were kind of part of Project Mogul that involved high altitude balloons. One of the things they started testing apparently was free falls. They were using balloons because they were faster and cheaper to test actual human beings falling from the air. So like ejection systems from high altitude, like the SR-71 Blackbird.
They would slap a dude on a balloon and send him up in the sky and say, we're going to drop you.
Eventually, it started with dummies, crash test dummies, which the Air Force says is the explanation for why people have said that they've seen alien bodies being like loaded in the night, like under the cover of lights, like loaded into vehicles or pulled out of wreckage or something is because it's these dummies. But they started from just dummies that were hanging from like in open air and would just be released from these balloons. And then what they do in the air was recorded. And, they were testing parachute systems and rigging. And eventually it turned into actually like capsuled manned trips where they would take them up to like 100,000 feet.
I would pay money to do that.
Which is like,
that'd be so much fun.
I don't know.
As long as they don't drop me.
Well, so then they started having people jump from that height then too.
Oh my God.
So it's
sponsored by Red Bull.
Well, yeah, right. I don't remember how high that recent jump was from, but basically from outer space. But so think about this though. Think about nobody's seen anything like this before. And you've got over the desert in New Mexico, these tests happening, these where, you've got a balloon that's, it didn't really look like a balloon. It was like a ball and then really, really long, kind of thin, narrow netting that went down to either a capsule or, this like these dummies. But these capsules looked kind of interesting. Some of them were sort of, like cylindrical. Some of them were discs, but nobody's ever seen that in the air before. And if you don't see the balloon or it's, in the clouds and you just see this sort of like disc, like floating through the air. Also when the balloons would deflate and come down, they'd kind of take on this disc shape as they got closer to the earth. So supposedly that combined with a lot of the high altitude, long range bomber aircraft that the Air Force and the U.S. military were researching out in Area 51, supposedly that is meant to kind of explain a lot of the UFO sightings that people have talked about over the years, especially during the time of the Cold War. I think that's pretty believable, honestly.
I do want to say this for everybody who's like, no, it's aliens. Look, I believe out of the billions of stars that are out there and the planets that revolve around them, it doesn't make sense that there wouldn't be aliens out there. So I do believe that there's another group of people out there.
I can get into that, but I think that there's pretty plausible explanations for a lot of what we're seeing. So
that's what I'm saying, though. The Cold War was, man, people don't quite understand the tension that was happening between these two powerhouses. It was kind of who was going to win, and it was a who could have the most bombs, who could have the most airplanes, who could spy on each other the most. So everything was so secretive. Of course, I think the government would be more happily like, yeah, it's aliens. Don't look over here. It's aliens.
Well, and that's why I bring all this up, honestly, is because we are quickly moving into a period of time in 2023 where we have some very dangerous and very capable enemies. And when I say we, I mean the United States. Mm-hmm. At this rate, it feels like North America. You know, we have some very, because Canada has been pretty involved in this over the last 4 shoot downs. Mm-hmm. It's concerning. You know, I mean, we look at the way Russia has been an aggressor in Ukraine.
I just hope they don't team up.
And now we're seeing China, there's been just interesting things going on with China, from, their actions in Hong Kong to, they've been buying up a bunch of farmland in the US, something like 200,000 acres, which, we've talked about this before. I was looking at this again. It's about 40 million acres of U.S. farmland that's owned by foreign countries. A lot of it's Canada and Germany, but some of it is China.
Yeah. And the reason we have a problem with that is because the basis of our beliefs are, the core of our values are completely different. I mean, the way that they react and treat their citizens is so different than how we do. We believe in freedom. We believe in, self-expression. We believe in freedom of speech. They do not. In fact, it's kind of just the opposite. It's like, line up or get out of the way. And if you don't get out of the way, they'll move you. It's like that billionaire that went missing. What was his name? I forget his name. He's like one of the richest.
Recently?
Oh, it was about a year ago.
Was it Elon Musk?
No. It was like one of the richest men in China. Said something against the government, and he just disappeared for 6 months. And then he came back with an official apology.
I bet he did.
Yes, he did.
What I was trying to get to there, I guess, is that the government has lied to us in the past.
Oh, they have? Oh my goodness. I'm so shocked.
A lot. Sometimes.
I feel like that's part of their job, propaganda and keeping.
Well, so here's the thing. We've seen this in the last, I think, several years in this country, that it's kind of this God complex that we as civilians here in the U.S. have, where, we have the most advanced Navy in the world by a long shot, until recently anyway. I would say that our Air Force and our air defense system is the most sophisticated.
Don't you feel like it's shocking that they didn't take care of this way before it even got close to us?
Hopefully it's a wake-up call for some of us, because we've been walking around like we don't have a thing to worry about. And I would say, as a society here in the U.S., it's been really easy to be hyper-focused inward about our own problems, our own issues. And sometimes when, just like with anything in life, if you back up far enough away from the problem, and gain a little bit more perspective and scale and scope, the importance of that problem changes pretty dramatically. And some of the things that we worry about here, I feel like, as a society, they're important. They become less important when you have major world superpowers that might throw a nuclear missile your way.
Yeah.
Suddenly, it feels like maybe we can put some of this on the back burner to focus on national security, focus on some of these potentially very dangerous powers.
Honestly, all this ideological way of thinking. That's fine and dandy. You want to think your own way, but does that really matter when someone might drop a nuke on us?
Right.
And so that, one of the things you're talking about, on the back burner, I've always wondered, why have we done business with them for so long? It's broke my brain where you can have something made across the world by someone, ship it all the way over here, pay the tax for import, bring it, drive it across to America, have it in a store, and it's still cheaper than having it made across the block. The reason that is because it's basically slave labor over there. And it's people are like, well, it's good money for them. It's well, that goes to show how rough it is over there. I just think that I think a lot of people have been waking up to like what a lot of people like myself have been thinking is like the way they treat like the Uyghurs over there, the way that they have like their internment camps or the re-education places. It's scary.
Yeah.
And they're like social credit score stuff. That stuff's scary. But I go back to what I said to you before on the phone. Everybody's worried about the balloons, the spy balloons from China. But on their phones, they have TikTok, and they give TikTok access to all of their photos, every location they go to, and access to their phone listening device at all times.
Yeah.
And that company is owned by the Chinese government. And they say, no, it's an independent company in China. Bullshit. Like you can't have a big company in China without them having almost full access to all of the IP, all of the data. So I don't like the idea of them coming into our airspace, but we've given them more access to anything from TikTok. And honestly, we should not have TikTok.
Yeah. I mean,
go to YouTube Shorts.
You're 100% right. Like that's really, really concerning. And I think that
like a lot of these kids, they're not going to know what to do if the tension keeps going between us and China, and TikTok's one of the first things to go. People need to start figuring out their entertainment and livelihood, because it's going to be like Vine, and everybody's going to, once Vine shut down and all the creators were like, I don't know what to do, I guess I'll start a YouTube channel. So
yeah, I think we've been slow as a country to address TikTok for the very real threat that I think we've come to realize that it is, but especially now.
We should read literally the terms and conditions one day on our podcast, and it will blow people's mind. Yeah, it's not like a generic one. I mean, it's so invasive. It's terrifying. I deleted it. I wiped my phone. I changed everything. They get access to literally stuff on all your network. Like, so if you're giving them permission to do stuff on your computer and all that stuff, and I mean, don't get me wrong, this is fun content on TikTok. I love it, but
and at some point, like you have to ask, doesn't the App Store bear like a little bit of responsibility for that? Like the Apple App Store?
Apple's tried to do a good job. It says, they have this option where it said, ask the app to try not to track us or whatever. It's some vague, do not track. It's like ask the app to not.
I dislike that Apple has that. I dislike that they phrase it that way.
But you've seen it, right?
It's like, I'm not going to ask my app or my phone to do anything. Like I will instruct it to do what I want it to do to serve me. It's like a piece of technology. Like I don't want to ask.
I know.
it will either do it or not. And I want to select that. Like that kind of irritates me.
The older I get, I'm like, can we just go back to a dial up?
So
sorry, I got off track a little bit, but like this is a serious, this is a serious issue. And yes, everybody's like, it's just a balloon, they'll shoot it down. But like, it's a somewhat of an invasion in its own right. Not a military invasion, but like it's poking the bear, but it's not just poking the bear. It's rolling them over and smacking them on the face. And
how badly do you want to know what was shot down though? Like
me? Oh my God. I want to be there and rumble through the shit and see. I mean, I just feel bad. They probably strapped some poor Chinese guy up there taking pictures. It's probably not a real satellite, just some poor guy named Sheen taking pictures.
Again, initial reports, this like Great Lakes balloon or Great Lakes UFO was that it was a balloon at 20,000 feet, which is low.
Yeah, people were seeing this balloon. They're like, that's the moon. Someone please tell me what that is. And people were freaking out.
Well, that's the one in Montana, which was at 60,000 feet.
Right. So that's that was my point. 20,000 feet is like, hey, mom, there's another Chinese balloon.
Is that a hot air balloon?
Yeah, at that point in time, some rednecks are out there like, pew, pew. I'm going to get it.
Maybe.
You know it.
Still not going to get it at 20,000 feet.
No.
But it might make him feel better. Instead, they'll be just sending ordnance into the next county, unfortunately. But
look, when they started, announcing that it was like UFO stuff, I'm like, or an unidentified object is how they did it. And people were like, it's a UFO, the government's saying it. And I want it one of these days. I would love to, have a, like, oh man, aliens are actually real. I'm like, oh, sweet, cool. But,
well, they released,
I don't believe that this is the case. It's balloons. But go ahead.
The U.S. government released pretty recently, actually, a report about like supposedly everything they knew about UFOs, and they released in the 90s, what they knew, I guess, everything about Roswell. But I think again, the reason I guess it's important to bring up Roswell and aliens and some of this stuff is that like our government, for the sake of national security and for the sake of conducting psyops, psychological operations, and throwing off other nations that pose a real dramatic threat to our nation, they will lie to us, and they will lie publicly to news medias. And I don't know, at some point, I don't know if that's the wrong thing to do, because I don't want them to lie to me about like things they're going to, like bills they're going to pass through Congress, or
I don't want them to lie to me about that like the Snowden stuff that they released.
Yeah.
That they were listening to all of our stuff.
The deep state.
But at some point in time, they're saying, well, it was for national security. It's like, yeah, but you're tapping everybody's text, everybody's phone calls, everybody's emails. Right. That's evil. That's
directly lying to the American people. And I don't know that we're going to get the full story, I guess is what I'm getting at. It's interesting. I'm really curious to see what they're going to tell us about this, because they haven't really told us much at all yet. We shut down the first balloon off the coast like several days ago, and we continue to shoot these things. And all they've said to us is this silverish gray cylindrical thing. It's like with no propulsion. And I find it hard to believe that they couldn't
phrase it another way,
that they've had, difficulty figuring it out. Now, what's interesting though, is like, we've both seen, I think, that footage that the US Navy released pretty recently.
Oh, the Tic Tac?
The Tic Tac thing.
That's some weird stuff coming up in and out of the ocean, going from 60,000 feet all the way down to like, a few feet off the ocean.
You and I have talked before about how, coming from the world of video production and seeing how advanced drone technology is, just civilian drones. We've used like micro drones, very small drones. We've used the first person drones that like strap on your head.
Oh yeah.
And people will drive them super fast and like indoors and everything. I've seen drones that are bigger than this table that we've used for like professional productions, that carry like 30, 40 pound cameras. The idea that China wouldn't have like a super advanced, version of that, like who knows? Which
is kind of scary, because it's like, are we behind on that stuff? And that's where I've had a lot of issue when it comes towards, they're not like I love the Chinese people. I know some amazing Chinese people, and I love a lot about their culture. It's beautiful. They've got such a cool history, but our views and our moral guidelines are not exactly aligned. So it's weird that we've been working so much and giving them so much money, and we've been giving them so much IP. Well, yeah, but they've been giving us, we've been like, oh yeah, make us this stuff. Here's everything on how to make it. And then they take it and they do those, I believe it's called moonlight shifts, where they're just ripping the products off and selling them elsewhere. It's the same product, but slightly different. So much of our IP is being stole from them. Yeah. And a lot of it too is like, unfortunately, in an oppressed nation like that, they don't have a tendency to be really creative, because, why go above and beyond when you're, it's just going to be taken from you. And at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know why we've been working with them the whole time. I'm curious what the next 6 months are going to be.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just curious to know what has been in our skies over North America. It's kind of amazing to me that like daily now we're shooting things out of the sky, which is so wild. Like, how in the world did there ever get to be, like, I'm kind of, we're here in Illinois.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here thinking, as we talk about it, even like, how did an object remain undetected and make its way through either Canada or the United States to the center of the country over the Great Lakes at only 20,000 feet? Or it descended to 20,000 feet. But I'm saying, like, this is concerning.
Yeah.
When they start potentially, like I said,
strapping a nuke on
lobbing intercontinental ballistic missiles. If we can't track and destroy earlier these slow moving high altitude balloons,
it's like we built the entire system to handle that intercontinental ballistic thing. That it's like no one's noticing.
Well, hopefully we did. Hopefully we're better at it.
Hopefully
with actual missiles.
I mean, but nobody was looking for the guy from Up, like flying over here from China. You know what I mean?
Well, and here's what's a little concerning.
That was a cartoon. Have you seen that one? Up. The guy with the balloon.
Yeah. It's a good movie. Yeah. It's a sad movie.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Like, I cried in that movie.
Yeah. And I'm not a crier. Well, first off, in the first 3 minutes of the movie, he realized they lose a kid. Okay. And then she dies. Then he's sitting there alone and realizing because of all that happening, they didn't have any money to go on the trip that they wanted to do together. And then after that's happening, you realize they're trying to steal his home from him, and he's fighting in them, and they're trying to put him in a home. And then he does this thing with the balloons, and you're like, yay. But like in the first 3 minutes of the movie, it's like you're crying. It's like, this guy isn't real. But the power of Pixar.
Yeah. He's like,
anyways, that was a tangent.
Generated. No, I mean, hey, we're talking about balloons.
Okay, here's the scenario then. Okay. A balloon is over your place. You got some land. It's 100 acres. It just crashed down, a balloon. You see it's this big balloon, and they've got this device. What do? Do you take pictures of this thing? Do you forge through it? Do you call the cops? Do you do you hide it in your barn?
If it's a Chinese spy balloon, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if it's a Chinese spy balloon. I'm curious what you would do.
Knowing what we know now? Or
knowing nothing. It's just happened. Like, are you calling the cops? Are you calling the science team? Are you taking pictures? Are you putting it up on eBay? What are you doing?
I mean, supposedly it was huge. Supposedly it was like the size, like the stuff hanging underneath is like the size of like 3 buses.
I know, but how,
so you might be repairing your barn or your house.
Do you think it's like, did a satellite fall out of the sky?
That's probably what I would think.
Yeah.
I would think like weather balloon, high altitude weather balloon, or like, I don't know, unless there's like Mandarin on the outside of it or something. I probably wouldn't think it was necessarily foreign.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's so bizarre. Like if you saw something in the shape of a bomb, you'd be like, oh, it's a bomb. I better call the authorities. But if all of a sudden there's this weird balloon in your backyard flopping around in the wind and there's this giant thing, it's all smashed up. It looks like a satellite.
Yeah. I can't help but wonder, what happens? A few of these had gone undetected. And what happens if, let's say 4 days ago, we had not noticed this balloon over Montana, over our missile sites? Apparently there's, again, several more of these objects over, our country in our airspace or in Canada's airspace. At what point do they begin attaching bombs, missiles, rockets to these balloons? Yeah. I did some research. Are you familiar with the term loitering munitions?
That sounds like a great band name.
That would be a good band name. Loitering munitions. So, talking about drones, specifically UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. Everybody's familiar with like the military drones that are like these planes. Loitering munitions, there's a few different approaches, but it's kind of a version of that. And essentially what it is it's a flying missile, like with wings, and typically a camera. A lot of times they're steerable. They're typically like launched out of a tube or shot from a truck, or literally like slingshotted off of like a ramp. And they're small, they're battery powered, and they basically look like a small home built like remote control airplane. Except they have a warhead on them.
It's awful.
So the idea is you launch these into the sky and they can fly around for 30 minutes, 45 minutes over a target. And you can track the target, wait for a situation to develop, wait to have like satellites or high altitude planes overhead, thermal cameras, whatever you need to identify a particular target. Once that target is identified and the green light is given, that loitering munition that's just flying in circles, undetected up above, too small in many cases for radar, then decides to descend, again, either automatically or being controlled by somebody else, and hits the truck, hits the house, hits the group, and destroys the target. There have been versions of this that look less like airplanes and look more like UFO triangles. In fact, some of the more recent ones have been supposedly in use between Russia and Ukraine, perhaps provided by Iran. I guess Iran was making them.
Which is kind of clever. It's like, is that a UFO? You might hesitate for a little bit.
Yeah. Iran was, they call them I think kamikaze drones, because again, you just fly them, they're missiles. Dude, and you fly them right into something. You
go get a drone for $500, strap a small grenade on it, and you just launch it out and hit it. It's cheaper than getting an actual.
So the U.S. is using those. There's one called, I forget what they call, something like the mosquito or it's like some kind of bug or something. It's literally like a drone this big that has a payload of like an explosive, and it just flies up into the air, in a battle space, like where there's actual like small arms fire happening between buildings or whatever, and it can identify where people are launching sniper like RPGs or sniper fire from a window or from a elevated position. You just fly the drone right inside and it blows up. So
warfare is going to be so weird in the future.
Well, I think it's weird now is my point. I've seen in digging into this whole loitering munitions, there have also been versions of this, like I said, that are less like small planes and more like floating objects. There's been like military expos. I've been to these before for work, showing simulators, but they'll show like advanced military weaponry that is for sale. You know, like that's what these companies like Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and some of these other like, you know, military defense contractors like that. That's what they do. One of the most like these triangular ones that I was telling you about, Kalashnikov, the company that makes like the AK-47, the AK-74 that we're all familiar with, the rifle, they're making that product. And some of these places, they can make versions of this so cheap, like they're like $20,000, $30,000. You almost can't afford to shoot them out of the sky because like the missiles to take these out are like $1 million, multi-million-dollar missiles.
Wow. So they're going to need to adapt, is what you're saying, because like we're so built up for a full onslaught of tanks and big missiles, and like even like what is it in Israel? They have that thing called the Iron Dome.
Yeah,
you know, where it's sensing the sky at all times, and they're always shooting rockets to hit it, and it collides. But like, what about a slow moving little balloon that just like floats in, and people are like, "What the heck?" So it's almost like you have to adapt in many different ways. To interrupt real quick, as advanced as things are, it's almost shocking sometimes how still in the dark we are. For example, my wife asked me, she said, "Well, why don't they just scan it and see what it's doing?" And I looked at her, I was like, "What do you mean just scan it?" She's like, "Yeah, can't we just see what it's trying to do? Can't we just scan it and see what it is?" I was like, "We don't have actually any technology really radar, you know, radar can
Maybe we don't.
Well, I hope to God we do, because basically we can't scan things to really see what it's made out of. We can kind of see what it's broadcasting. We can't.
But maybe the U.S. military.
I hope it does.
And that's where I go back to like, I kind of hope there are things that the military hasn't shared with me.
For sure.
Because I would like to hope that they can do some things that I can't.
Sure. Well, look in the 80s, was it when the stealth bomber, before they announced that it was out, you know that they were spending 20 years working on that thing. Right. People are like, "There's nothing on the radar, but I see something, you know, diamond in the sky." Why am I always talking like a Southern accent? When I get tired, I have a Southern accent.
No, every time you're trying to impersonate someone who sees some sort of strange object in the sky.
Because I know that guy.
Like redneck.
Look, I grew up in the South. The guy's like, "Look, I was out feeding my cows. I saw something." And you're like, "Well, what'd you see?" "You know." I'm like, I don't know.
Something's out there.
Something's out there. It's like a plane, a balloon. "What'd you see?" He goes, "I don't know. I'm just saying." I was like, "No, you're actually not saying." I've had that conversation a dozen times with different guys.
You're having it with me now, I guess.
Yeah, but like, I hope to God that they have technology that we don't know.
Supposedly.
But then how, if that be the case, how did it sneak over to America?
I know. Well, but what they have said is that part of the reason for not shooting it down, we can get into that if we want to, but one of the things that's been communicated from our government, whether it's the truth or not, I don't know, but they say they've collected a lot of information about it. How, you know, where it came from, what it's transmitting, what it's doing, why.
Well, they do drop some guy named Doug on the side of the balloon just to hack into. I'm in. Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
How did they, you know?
I'm sure it's more sophisticated than what we even know about, but I hope they learned a lot. That's for sure, because clearly there's a lot getting by us. And that's what's worrisome, is that knowing where these balloons have been flying over our airspace, how close to strategic military sites they've been, you know, I'm fearful of like how this escalates, you know, how this ratchets up, because these objects still continue to pop up in our airspace. Like we shot down one off the coast of Alaska before it was in U.S. airspace, but it was not over land. The other three, the first one made its way all the way across the heartland. Apparently this most recent one was over the Great Lakes. So it either, again, traversed our country.
It's hard to keep up with how many of them there are.
It's 4 total now. I'm just realizing too, by the way, they scrambled F-22s last night over Montana for a radar anomaly. They sent up jets that, by the way, gave up the search because they couldn't find the object in the dark. That's a problem. That's a problem. Now I wonder, was that the object? Like, you know, like they scrambled it, couldn't find it. They called it a radar anomaly. And then we find this balloon at 20,000 feet over the Great Lakes. That's probably what we're dealing with. Unless there's, I mean,
that's terrifying if we can't like track these things, because like we said, if they're adding any type of munitions on it, it makes it scary. I don't know why though China would be doing this. Like they're not doing great economically right now. They're having such a huge amount of people retiring right now that they just can't be in the workforce anymore. And they don't have the young generation to replace it. So that they're going to have a bunch of people burdening the system. And so they're going to be, and then we're not going to be doing as much trade with them because of these tensions. Like we didn't go over for that summit or whatever it was going to be. We called it off last minute because of this. Why would they want to poke the bear?
If I was China, this right now is when I would try to become the world superpower.
Because they're losing. Because
we have a president that's like 110 years old who I believe can't handle a global World War III. I don't think that is in the cards for Joe Biden, regardless of how you feel. Many people have said that Biden has done things that have made us look weak on the world stage.
Oh, sure.
The Afghanistan pullout is one obvious.
That was embarrassing.
And, you know, on top of that, who knows how much information China's collected through TikTok, like we've talked about. Who knows how much information they've been collecting, unbeknownst to, you know, North America. Further reasons to target the U.S. right now, if you're China, I would say also is like we are more divided than we've been in modern history. I think it doesn't feel like a super unifying time to be an American, and that's a great time for a foreign actor to strike. The fact that China owns us financially, we owe so much money to China.
Yeah, they bought so many of our bonds and all that stuff. It's embarrassing.
Everything we make, like you said, everything is supplied from China. And also, like the reality is too, like Russia is not in a great place right now. Like they've been embarrassed and I think weakened by what was anticipated to be a much smaller, less capable force in Ukraine. And Ukraine has, I think, exposed what was really an overhyped Russian military.
Well, that also goes to show if you got someone who believes and they've got a cause, and then you give them a lot of good ammunition made by Americans, you can hold back a big country. And they've had billions of dollars of our stuff. And so, I mean, we've got good stuff. And with Russia being weak, man, it's just weird. I feel like we're fighting on so many fronts, and it's like we never stop. It's like we got out of Afghanistan, and it's like, okay, there's Russia. Okay, Russia. Now there's China, and it's discouraging, man.
Yeah. Do you know much about Nord Stream pipeline? Have you followed that?
I have a little bit. As soon as it was bombed, I was like, oh yeah, we did that shit. Like I told her right off the bat, I was like, oh yeah, we did that. Here's why. Blah, 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 blah,
now
blah.
It's sounding like maybe we did.
Of course we did. Of course we did. And if not us, those guys did it. And we just supplied them like the fins to get there. I mean, like I think we helped the Ukrainians do it. Or we directly did it.
Or I
aliens.
I agree with you.
Aliens.
But if we look at this whole China thing from a global perspective.
Was it a weather balloon?
Is it possible China did it?
Ooh.
Like,
here's the thing, man. China's not stupid. They're playing chess and we're playing Fortnite. I mean, like they're thinking 100 years out and we're thinking only 2 years out election wise. So it's like,
so look at how China's been behaving, sending out balloons across the world to spy on different continents. We have what they perceive as a weakened U.S., a weakened Russia. If you're preparing for something real big as China, wouldn't it make sense to destroy the natural gas pipeline that supplied Europe? And would also, so Europe is limited in resources, and then also it further limits financial resources for Russia. Like if you're trying to prove, if you're potentially planning a global move that is going to make you top dog, you know, taking an action that reduces the resources of both Russia and Europe and makes it look kind of obvious that it was the U.S., you know, maybe all at once you can cut the legs out from different world superpowers and potentially cause them to, go to war with one another. Because that's potentially that's the other story that's broken in just the last few days in the midst of all of this.
Well, I mean, so for example, a lot in the past, Indians would want to attack another Indian tribe. They would use.
We're talking Native Americans?
Native Americans, excuse me.
Sorry, we've been talking about Asia. Sorry. So.
Native Americans would actually sometimes make feathers look like there were certain tribes' feathers.
Yeah, it's a false flag.
They would attack and kill a small group of say women, hunting, gathering or whatever. And people are like, oh my God, the Comanches attacked us. And then they have a warring tribe and they go after, and then half the men die. Then they swoop in and just take over that land and the women and it's been happening for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, look at Hitler. What was the building that got burnt down? Was it their parliament version? And then he blamed a certain people. And then people were like, it looks like they're the ones who actually started the fire. Mm-hmm. And it's happened throughout history. That's why, unfortunately, history makes people kind of conspiracy theorists, because you look back and be like, okay, the government lied about this. They lied about this. Well, that government lied about this. And it's like you get to where you're going down a rabbit hole and you can't trust anybody. Yeah. And I wish it's easier if it's aliens. Please just tell me it's people from Mars and they're going to tell us how to have free energy, because I'm really sick of these electricity bills.
By the way, I got into, when I'm looking at loitering munitions, have you heard of ionic propulsion?
Sorry, I'm laughing. I feel like that's a fart that's bubbling. It's a loitering munition. It's just loitering in your belly, and it's like, I need to warn everybody. It's been loitering. And it's munition. I keep wanting to say musician.
It's near to the battle space, yes. And we could be deployed at any moment.
Sorry. You had a good point, and I'm like,
I don't know. I think I forgot what I was even saying now. We were talking
loitering music. Oh, my Lord. Magician. God damn. Munition. Thank you.
I don't even remember what I was going to say.
Look.
What was I talking? Do you remember what I was saying?
Something about energy.
Oh, ionic propulsion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because supposedly
I'm talking about fart jokes, and these
things that you really threw me off.
Ionic propulsion,
because it fit really well, actually. Okay. The analogy. It's a whole thing. I don't know much about it, but apparently it can allow for flight of small, lightweight objects without any kind of like propeller or jet propulsion or anything. It's basically like using the molecules in the air, the ions in the air or something to create lift. It's super weird, but it got me thinking about like these things that have been seen in the sky that supposedly have no propulsion or no visible propulsion. Like, what are they?
I want it to be aliens.
Man, I don't know. We'll find out. We'll see.
But as soon as they show up and they're scary looking, I'm going to run. I just feel like at the end of the day, when the government's saying it's UFOs, it's something else. And to go to prove what you were saying earlier, they claimed it was a UFO just to hide the fact that it was one of their spy balloons. And I just think overall, man, it's weird times. I know we're scared about the spy balloons. Get rid of TikTok. I think it's not good for everybody. And I also think mentally it's not good for you. But
more ways than one, yeah.
I mean, there's so many other options. And what sucks is all these other big tech companies are tracking you anyways. It sucks, but you don't want a foreign enemy. And it's weird to say that China's an enemy, because yet we've been doing business with them for a long, long time. And
we'll see where this goes. Like this could get bad and get serious really quickly. It's not great right now.
You know what sucks though? A lot of it is the people have no issues with each other. Like there's a lot of people that I know, I mean, from China that I've met, wonderful people. They probably would think this was bullshit. And then there's a lot of Americans that just like, why do the powers that be want to be doing this stuff to cause issues? And at the end of the day, unfortunately, it's us that suffer, not the guy at the top, because it's illegal to assassinate a foreign leader. So
it's also illegal to blow up a pipeline
without,
according to our, to American law, like it's illegal to do that without congressional approval, which we didn't have.
Well, that's where they hire it out.
Well, supposedly it was hired out to Navy divers and was done in coordination with like Sweden and I think Norway.
So they're giving out that much information, huh?
They're not giving anything out.
Well, it also didn't, first off, it didn't make sense to me anyways that, okay, we're all sanctioning Russia, but we're still continuing to buy the thing that makes them the most money. Like I knew it was going to suck with the prices of gas and stuff like that, but like that's where they make most of their money. So like, wouldn't it make more sense to just cut that off? And that's where
it's not gasoline though. It's not oil. It was it's natural gas, I guess, with the pipeline.
But that's what most of Europe is like heated with.
Yeah,
that we shouldn't be dependent upon another nation.
That's us here too in the U.S. But
yeah, I mean, I think the grids should get smaller and smaller and smaller. Where, houses should have all batteries so that if the power goes out, you're good for 5 or 6 hours. Like there should be some flux. I mean, for God's sakes, we've been getting brownouts lately in Washington, and it's just like, come on, guys, it's 2023. Let's get this together, and it's weird. Anyways, let's wrap it up. We're back. We're rough.
How do we wrap this up?
He doesn't want it to be aliens. I want it to be aliens, but it's probably just balloons from China. And delete TikTok. That's my opinion. Don't get me wrong, it's entertaining, but half the stuff is on YouTube now. Go to YouTube.
I know we're leaving. Oh, but what if it's all just a false flag? What if they're all U.S. balloons?
Dude, I mean, who the fuck knows? I mean, like, I'm being straight. Like, half the time, you see it, it's like so many times throughout history, it's like a leader is looking bad and they're doing something stupid. They get caught having an affair with someone, then magically this war comes up. It's like, well, you can't, get rid of this guy now because we're at war. It just...
There's a lot happening right now too. Like we should maybe like get together before the next podcast just to like.
We usually talk about like inspiring businesses and like how to make money. And guess what? Here's a good way to make money in a recession. Become like a Raytheon. Like make stuff that like goes boom.
Make defense products.
Oh man. Yeah.
Apparently going in the business of whatever will shoot down balloons.
Oh, okay.
Effectively and inexpensively. Maybe drones too.
Yeah. We're back at it. When we have 29,000 subscribers. Thanks everybody. And if you like this, subscribe, give a thumbs up. If you hate it, please leave a comment. I read every one of them. It's very funny. Call me stupid, call me fat. It's a lot of fun. So Dave cries. He gets very offended for some reason. I
cry when people make fun of you.
Oh no. I sip my coffee and look, trolls are funny on the internet.
Yeah, no, it is funny.
But
people are probably going to troll this because clearly we are not national security advisors, but we're just a bunch of goofs like trying to make sense of what the hell's going on.
We're just brother-in-laws trying to figure shit out in this world. And hear me out. It's not aliens. It's just glitches in the Matrix.
Do you think it's Up? Do you think it's the guy from Up? That's what these balloons are? He's like, I'm just trying to get to the Cayman Islands. Stop shooting my shit down. Why is everybody Southern today? I'm too tired. Listen, that's it. We're Chasing Mountain Podcast. We're back at it. This is episode 1 of season 2. Thank you everybody so much for the support and the love and the hate. It's wonderful. See you later.
Bye.
The thoughts and opinions on this show do not reflect those of our advertisers, employers, or other affiliates. The content should not be considered legal or financial advice. The Chasing Mountains podcast is a production of Chasing Mountains Media.